Good morning, stats. We are going to move into the next chapter. You're going to notice we're going to have quizzes throughout the year. I'm not really going to give any big long tests. If I do, we'll definitely prepare for that. But we're going to have quiz. Our next quiz is going to include 1.9 and a few sections from chapter 2. So I kind of want to break it down to where I can get on a schedule here and we can have a quiz on every Friday. I've been off a little bit, but we're going to start that next week. So we're going to have one section from chapter 1, and then we'll do a few sections from chapter 2 on our next quiz, just to kind of give us a schedule where we know we're learning, review quiz. So 2.1, relationships between two categorical variables. So again, talking about categorical, we're looking more at a count when we describe categorical variables, as opposed to the other type. So the first objective here is to distinguish between explanatory and response variables for categorical data. So we're now going to get into having an X and a Y value. Okay, our response variable measures an outcome of a study, and it's what we respond to. The outcome is how we respond. So this is normally our Y variable. The explanatory variable, okay, may predict or explain. Again, predict or explain changes in response of a variable. That's our independent or our X variable. So sometimes there isn't a clear explanatory or response variable. And if that's the case, then I definitely have to describe or give you and tell you which one is explanatory or the response variable. But examples, eye color or hair color, those could be either or as we move forward here. So we're going to take a look at a couple of examples here, and we're going to try and decipher between the two. Okay, so the first one is I want you to identify the explanatory variables for the following relationships and explain your reasoning. The first one says opinion about tax reform and political party membership. So not sure how political we are. Hopefully you're not too political at a young age. But most of the time, if you're a Republican, you do not like taxes. You want there to be less taxes. You want less of your money taken out. And Democrats are normally okay with a little bit more taxes because they're in favor of social programs and such, and giving a little bit more of their own money to help out others. So the opinion about tax reform and political party. So we could say political party membership. Okay, so explain which one of these is explanatory variable. The political party membership, because it may help predict a person's opinion about tax reform. So we would say political party membership, because it may help predict a person's opinion on tax reform. Now, it's not saying it definitely every single person, but again, we could draw a prediction from whether or not someone is in favor of more taxes or less taxes. And again, that's not for everybody, but for the majority, we could. Okay. Then you have anger level, low, moderate, or high, and whether or not a person has coronary heart disease. There's definitely a link to people that have high or more stress and anxiety, put more stress on the heart. So we could say anger level, again, is the explanatory variable, okay, because it may predict whether or not, that is not how you spell weather, a person has or develops coronary heart disease. Okay. So again, looking at which one of these is the explanatory variable, we've got to be able to decipher between the two. But the anger level is the explanatory variable because it may predict. So we're looking at what may predict of what could happen, and we're talking about coronary heart disease. Okay. So there's going to be a few problems like this. I want to take a look at the next section here, which is making segmented bar charts to display the relationship between two categorical variables. And again, when we're getting into this, we're obviously going to use the Stats app quite a bit, and things like that. So we have already done a side-by-side bar chart. So we've already done a side-by-side. So this here is a side-by-side. And we did that in chapter 1. Okay. A segmented bar chart displays the possible values of categorical variable as segments of a rectangle. So again, they're kind of broken off into segments here of each one, with the area of each segment proportional. So area of each segment proportional to the percent of individuals in the corresponding categories. So we had this problem back in chapter 1 where we talked about what superpower would you prefer to be. In a side-by-side, if I asked what would be the, what superpower would females prefer, you could clearly see that it was freeze time. You could see that it was telepathy. Okay, and second close is to fly, to be able to fly. And for males, it's freeze time. When we go over here to the bar, we got to understand, first of all, both of these rectangles are going to be at 100% because we are surveying 100% of the females and 100% of the males. And then what we're looking for here is the largest box to show that shows the favorite power. You must have a key. Okay, so the female male would be the explanatory variable, okay, or the X, right? This is the X axis. Then the Y value is our key. So our key is always going to be our response, and that's our Y value. Okay, and you must have a key for a response when you're making these bar charts here. So again, you can tell just a little bit larger for the males. Clearly, freeze time is the largest box here. Here, it's a little bit harder to tell whether it is the telepathy or the fly, but we know from the side-by-side bar chart that it is telepathy for the largest for the females. So what we're going to do is we're going to now look at a segmented bar chart, and we're going to make one together. So let's look at an example here. Oh, no, let's first talk about this. So these are the important parts of basically what I was showing you there. Okay. So how to make a segmented bar chart. And again, we're going to do this using the applet, so that's not a huge issue. But we got to make sure we establish our variables, okay? The explanatory versus the response. The axes, the explanatory variable is on the horizontal axis because that's our X. Okay, explanatory is always on the X-axis. The percent of response variable is the vertical axis, or our Y value, okay? Bars, each bar is going to represent 100% of the explanatory variables. The entire count is going to be included in those bars. And the key, you got to make sure you have a key. It identifies the different categories of the response variable. Okay, so again, when looking at that, make sure that we have an idea of what those 4 things are when we're looking at those variables. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a second. I want you to jot this picture down, but understand what we're doing here. It says in 1912, the luxury liner Titanic, on its first voyage across the Atlantic, struck an iceberg and sank. Some passengers got off the ship in lifeboats, but many died. The two-way table gives information about adult passengers who survived and died by class of travel. Make a segmented bar chart to display the relationship between survival status and class of travel for passengers on the Titanic. So, the first class passengers were normally higher up in the ship, where second class was kind of in the middle and third class was lower. And you can see the numbers here about survived and um, passengers that died. So it shows, but what we're going to do is compare these three. So first class, you had 197 survive, 94 survive for second class, and 151. You can't just compare this data looking at those numbers roughly, because you would say, oh, more students or more third class survived than second class. But when you look at the total number of, the percentage varies. Okay, so what we're going to do is make a chart here. Okay, so we're going to make a segmented bar chart. So we're going to go to our stats app. So let's go to the app. We're going to go to a 2 categorical variables. Okay, so again, we're going to type this in. For the explanatory variable is class of travel. So if you did not and you want to do this with me, go back and take a picture of this. The response variable was survival status. Okay, then we're going to fill in these numbers. Okay, and this was column. This was first class. First, this was second. Need to add another column here, which was third. Then my row name was survived and died. And then we're going to enter in the count. Okay, there was 197. There was 94 that survived. 94. There was 151. And then there were 122 first class passengers that passed away, 167 second class, and 476 third class travelers. So again, we can go to begin analysis. And here is our segmented bar chart. So we want to go ahead and copy and paste that into our data, and then we can talk about this a little bit. So we're going to insert. Now, as you can see here, relative frequency. So we're talking about percentages of survival and died here. And you can see that, you can clearly see, and we're going to talk about this in the next video, but the percentage of third class passengers is clearly higher that died than survived. And same thing with first class, it's clearly higher that more survived for first class than died. So we're going to stop here. I'm going to add one more video to this lesson, but that's how you create a segmented bar chart.